Indigenous peoples continue to be some of the leading solution-focused voices on the climate crisis.
Indigenous peoples are on the point of the spear. They are on the front lines protecting what is sacred for the planet. If we don't take urgent action from the streets all the way up to the boardrooms, in every corner, in every avenue, we as a human species may cease to exist.
Michelle Cook is a human rights lawyer, an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, and founder of Divest, Invest, Protect, an organization that encourages corporations and banks to divest from fossil fuel-related companies, invest in Indigenous people, and protect Indigenous rights and their land.
I've come to this work through necessity as an Indigenous woman because we have to learn it, we have to do it so that we can survive and protect our people.
Indigenous people's land is constantly being used by companies for environmentally harmful practices, like the construction of oil pipelines. Not only are pipelines bad for the planet, but they lead to a loss of land and resources for Indigenous people. Cook and her organization meet with powerful business leaders to try to encourage them to follow DIP's mission and not invest in practices that will hurt Indigenous people or the planet.
We have to understand where is the funding for this chaos coming and how do we intervene so that we can stop the chaos and stop the violence before it ever arrives in our communities. And so going to investors and going to banks and financial institutions, credit rating agencies, and insurance companies are incredibly important. It provides an opportunity for the companies in question to do their due diligence, that is, to take the right steps to make sure that they are protecting, respecting, and providing remedy for the Indigenous human rights abuses that their business relationships may be directly linked to or contributing to anywhere throughout the supply chain. Behind every Indigenous human rights abuse in this world is a trail that is hot with blood and with money. And every single human rights abuse in the world usually, unfortunately, has a profit-driven motive. And so it's actually quite easy, if you see human rights abuses in that context, to simply follow the money. Fossil fuel companies are responsible for 2/3 of all global gas emissions. 90 companies are responsible for that. And so we really have to turn our attention and our analysis and our movements not just towards the governments, but also towards the banking, towards the financial industries, and to the corporations. And of course, they're all very much tied and fused together as well. So we have a lot of work to do.
Cook said Indigenous people are often overlooked in the conversations about the environment.
Some of the barriers I've faced doing this work, I think, is a racially biased perception of incompetency against Indigenous peoples, that because we're talking about finance, which is considered a discourse of Western civilization, that somehow Indigenous women are not educated regarding economies or political economy for that matter. You know, we've really had to negotiate some very difficult learned racial biases in some of these boardrooms. And I think that we have to be aware that they exist, and we have to be aware when we encounter them, how we encounter them, and doing so in a healthy and productive way. And also, as always, using it as an education moment. Racial capitalism is part and parcel of climate change, is part and parcel of colonization, and we have to take action on all levels to be able to face the challenges that are going to come.
Pope has a lot of influence. A lot of people listen to him, so we need to ask him for help. We respect all faiths so that all religions and people can have peace.
Cook believes ignoring Indigenous people is a mistake.
Indigenous peoples generally, especially Indigenous women, have a lot of knowledge to share regarding their practices and their visions of what a future sustainable economy should look like. I think we've really created a new platform, a new way of discussing decolonization in the financial industry, talking about Indigenous and business and human rights, and I think a whole new way, and a whole new conversation that I hope is initiated and led by Indigenous peoples all over the world.